Hello, I'm Jill Moats with the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the issues that might come up with caring for loved ones and personal care routines. Now, I'm an occupational therapist, and I've been working with geriatrics for a long time, and I've been working with people with dementia, but I also have a mom who has Alzheimer's disease. And so sometimes I'm talking from the perspective of a daughter, and sometimes I'm talking from the perspective of a therapist. But what I would encourage you to do is to remember that there are no right answers for some of these questions, but that what I'm going to do is provide you with some ideas about important things to think about, knowing that the circumstances are different for each person, and that you need to make the decision about what's right for your loved one in the end. Personal care routines can become a problem for people for various reasons. Sometimes the person with dementia forgets that we have rules in our society about how often we must bathe or keeping clean. And remember that our personal care routines are based on a lot of social rules, and these people don't necessarily remember the social rules, so it can become a problem for them that way. Another reason it can become a problem is that sometimes people with dementia develop things called delusions. Delusions are false beliefs about something, and they might have a delusion, for example, that the sewer water is going to come up from the bathtub. It's not true, it's not going to happen, but if they're fearful because of this, then they might be scared of having their bath. So sometimes delusions or hallucinations or paranoia, which are a result of the dementia, may contribute to some of the problems. There are a lot of different strategies and possible solutions. One of them is just to make sure that the room or the place where the person is having their self-care done is comfortable. So if we're talking about bathing, make sure it's warm, make sure that it's comfortable for the person. If they're cold, it's okay for them to wear a t-shirt when they're sitting in the bathtub. You can kind of change the rules a little bit. You don't always have to follow the guidelines about how you've always done it. Be prepared to be a little bit flexible. There are pieces of equipment that can make things easier. For example, bathing, you can get tub seats, you can get grab bars. If you're talking about shaving, you can use electric razors. With dressing, you can get clothing that's easier to put on and take off. Things that are fastening down the front, for example, Velcro fastenings. Those are all pieces of equipment that can kind of help the tasks and make them easier. One other point is that people want to be independent. People want to do the task themselves, and they know that they've been doing their self-care activities all their lives. So to have someone come in and tell them what to do can make them annoyed. So what you want to do is try and make sure that you allow the person as much independence as possible. And that will depend on the level of their dementia, and it will depend on a lot of other circumstances. Try and risk the temptation of leaping in and doing everything for them, and instead allow them to do the pieces that they can do themselves while providing a little bit of cueing or a few words or a few gestures that might help them realize, oh, what next needs to be done next, rather than having you come in and just do it all for them. Now, that being said, I realize that that takes time, and time is a huge issue. It's really important to allow the person to plan yourself so that the person has time and doesn't feel rushed. If you're rushed, they're going to sense it, and it's not going to go well. So allowing yourself enough time to make sure that they don't feel rushed is really important. Routines are important as well, because people with dementia do follow the things they know the best, and if there's a routine and if it's working, that's the way to stay, because routines really help them to function. On the other hand, if you've been doing something a certain way all this time and it's not working well, then maybe it's time to consider something different. So being flexible is also important. Being flexible about the frequency with which you do things. We follow the rule that you have to have a bath every day because that's the way everyone does it and that's what we expect. A generation ago, I can remember growing up when I was little, we just had a bath on Saturday night, and that was okay in that generation. So there are no hard and fast rules, but you're going to need to give yourself some flexibility and allowing yourself to think about how often do we really need to do this, and is it worth making an issue of right now? Sometimes it is. If it's the afternoon of your grandson's wedding, it's probably important to have a bath that day. But if you're hanging around the house, maybe we can let it go this day. Allowing choices is really important too. Now that doesn't mean that any choice goes all the time. Choices give people a sense of independence and a sense of dignity. So choices are important, but it's not always a yes-no kind of a choice. If you offer a choice, do you want to have your bath today, honey? You must be prepared to accept the answer, no. So if you're not prepared to accept that answer, then it's not the right choice. Other choices you could offer are, would you like to brush your teeth first or have your bath first? That's a choice that's much more limited, still giving the person a sense of choice. It's important that you do some preparation, especially if there's an activity that is going to feel uncomfortable. And that might be taking the time to do some nice activity ahead of time, sitting down, having a cup of coffee and chatting about nice times, or going to get a nice photo album and looking through the photo album and talking about the trophies that your husband won when he was playing baseball in high school. Something that's going to help the person feel good and that affirms them. That's going to start the day off right so that you don't move into this difficult activity where you're all not feeling good. Sometimes just a personal affirmation is good. One thing I do with my mom regularly is I give her an affirmation about, I say to her, Mom, you know what? I feel like I'm really lucky to have had a mom like you. When I was growing up, you did so many wonderful things for me, and I always think about how lucky I am that I had you for a mom. And that's true, and she knows it's true, and I believe it, and she believes it, and it makes her feel really good. And it's something I can offer to her for free, and I don't have to put a lot of effort into it, and it helps her to feel relaxed and happy with me, and then we can move on to some more difficult tasks, and it's sometimes a bit easier. Communication during the activity is important, how you talk to the person. People don't like being told, no, don't do that, stop. So if they're getting into some trouble and doing some things that aren't really what you had anticipated they should be doing, then sometimes starting to talk about something different or gently leading them away while you talk about, if they're in, say they're opening a drawer and emptying everything out and they're not supposed to be doing that and it's bothering you and they're creating a bit of a fuss, then rather than saying, no, stop, don't do that, say, hey, honey, I think there's a football game on TV. Let's go into the living room and maybe we can turn that on. A distraction works wonders, helps them move away without being told that they're doing something bad and having bad feelings about what they were doing. Now, that being said, if they're doing something physically dangerous that's putting people's lives at risk, then you have to say no, of course. So it depends on the circumstances. But many times it's just a bit of a mess and you can leave it and clean up later. Talking with people about their delusions usually doesn't help. You need to understand the feelings they have and be very supportive and listen to the tone they're talking in and appreciate the fact that, yes, it sounds like you're really scared right now, but arguing about whether there's a person in the basement or not, when you know there's no person there, but the person has a delusion, it's not going to work, because delusions are fixed beliefs. Or if they are having some paranoia, arguing about it usually doesn't work because of the nature, it's part of the dementia. Instead, what often works is to support their feeling and say, I know you're feeling scared, honey, but I went downstairs and everything's okay. And giving them that reassurance, listening to the tone of voice, acknowledging their fear, and then moving on by giving them something positive to think about. Moving on while you're thinking, oh, do you remember Johnny's coming over? Your grandson Johnny, he's coming over this afternoon. Maybe what we can do is pull out those Lego blocks and we can play Lego with them. Would that be fun? Something like that that's going to get them thinking, oh, that's something nice to look forward to, rather than focusing on that scary thought that they had, whatever that might have been. That being said, sometimes things just don't work very well, and you find yourself where it's escalating and you can't get out of it. Sometimes it's time to just stop the activity and leave it and say, okay, it's not working, we're going to stop. Now, if the person's in the middle of their bath, you can't just stop. You have to get out of the bathtub somehow, but maybe you end that bath right then and there and realize, because you don't want to provoke the person to the point of where they're going to hit you or something like that. You don't want it to get that far. So stop it, knowing when to stop, when to leave it and say, okay, we're going to stop and move on is really important. You also want to make sure you're physically safe from a body mechanics perspective. So if the person's needing help getting in and out of the bathtub, make sure you've learned how to help them physically so that you don't get back problems and hurt your back, because you're not going to be any help to them if you've got a sore back from lifting them inappropriately out of the bathtub. You can get consults with an occupational therapist or a physical therapist that might be of help with some of the equipment issues, or that might be help with helping you learn how to get in and out of the bathtub properly. So those might be options for you to consider. And one last point to suggest to you is that if you've been trying something and it's not working, then try something different. And don't feel you have to keep trying it the way you've been trying it. Allow yourself more flexibility, allow yourself to look at things with different lenses, and maybe you'll find a way that works for you. Thanks very much.